Hello, my name is Brian Farr. I'm a licensed professional counselor and a financial therapist in Portland, Oregon. Since 2004, I've been using simple financial worksheets to help clients get a clear picture of what's going on with their household finances. I'm wanting to share this with you today because our practices are going to get filled up with people who have challenges with their finances as a result of the COVID pandemic. Make myself smaller and introduce you to the snapshot. As I said, I've been using this since 2004. It is not a budget. People don't like the word budget, and I've learned to just stay away from that. A snapshot is just a picture of what the average monthly income and expenses look like. So let me introduce you to the snapshot. There's 3 pages. Page 1 is the expenses. Page 2 is the income. And page 3 is the debt worksheet. The information from the debt worksheet will flow back through to the page 1 expenses. So I'll start at the top and just give you a brief introduction. Actually, if you haven't discovered the link yet, you might want to stop the video. The link is in the description just below the title. And this document lives on my website under the worksheet forms. And so take a minute. I would encourage you to print the 3 pages so you can take notes as I describe it. Okay, here we go. I'm going to turn this sideways to start with. If you turn yours sideways and look along the right-hand column, mostly fixed expenses, variable expenses, periodic expenses, and then the debt payments. The reason it's broken into those 4 categories is that it's just an easier way to see how money's moving through the household. Typically in a household, it's going to come through in one of these 3 ways, plus the debts, paying off debts, money that was spent beforehand. Okay, so here's the snapshot. This first section, the mostly fixed, it's just as the name says, month in and month out, these are going to be mostly the same. Rent mortgage is right here on top. That's a big expense for most people. If they own property and they're paying the property tax, it should be broken down into the monthly value, even if they pay it in November, to make sure to get it broken down into the monthly. Home repairs, these on newer homes is not such a big issue, and older homes it is. So coming up with a monthly average is important there. Auto loans and payments, auto loans and auto insurance, those are fixed. They're going to be the same month in and month out, but the auto repairs, once again, the monthly average. Gasoline, and then the utilities. So that group up there is the, if you asked 1,000 people to estimate their monthly expenses, they get that group right. This next section, the variable, that's where people underestimate how much they're spending. They also underestimate in the periodic. In the variable, we've got groceries and meals out. Those are 2 big categories. I've learned that those 2 categories take a lot of discussion. Sometimes it takes some research to pull out how much is really being spent there. There's the most variation. A lot of times when people want to cut back on their spending, they go after that first. I'm cautious with people putting themselves into a financial straitjacket. It's kind of like a crash diet, and then they'll bounce right back. So part of the reason I encourage people to get the snapshot, which is a picture of typical expenses, not a projection of what they want to do in the future, but what's been happening, what's been the reality. And in this COVID environment, I'm encouraging people to look at January and February of this year, of 2020, as their baseline. And then the adjustments they've been making because of the pandemic or because of a lost income, furlough, those kinds of things, then they can go from there. It's also possible that you're working with a client who's far enough into this that they just need to start with the reality of March and April and their expenses then. And looking back to January and February is not going to be that helpful. So it could go either way. Continuing with variable, I'll just highlight the entertainment, recreation, hobbies, sporting activities. That's the catch-all. That could be sewing classes, that could be concert tickets, or iTunes expenses, Netflix, anything that fits in there. It's a catch-all. The third category is the periodic expenses. Let me pull in a little bit closer and you can see this easier, I think. The dependent care. This one, it gets a chuckle sometimes, grouping children and pets all on one line. My objective on this snapshot was to get all the expenses onto one page, then the income on the second page. So it's a simple document rather than a big complex document. But that means that there's a lot of things that get collected here. Obviously, if you've got children and you're, you know, summer expenses, Christmas expenses, back to school expenses, you're familiar with that kind of cycle. Add all those up, divide by 12 to get a monthly average is what's suggested here. Pets is another one. Some of the veterinary bills on pets, I've seen some pretty large numbers there. So working to get an average on those dependent care line is helpful. Coming on down here, insurance premiums, just want to clarify that if your medical is covered by your employer, you don't include it here. If you're paying your own medical or the stuff that's you're out of pocket, then it would be included on this line. Vacations are going to be challenging this year. We don't know what's going to open up. I'm going to encourage people just to put a guess what they hope they can do if things open back up. I'm sure they'll open up in some form, but travel will probably be more limited. And then gifts to others and charity, that can be an expensive line for some families, big families that give gifts. I remember having a client who's, 8 siblings, and most of the birthdays were in May, and it was a family they gave birthday gifts all the way through. Another one on this line is December, Christmas gifts, other religious holidays, travel, extra food, all of those kinds of things. People get caught by surprise, even though December happens every year, right after November. But still, it can be a surprise if people are not anticipating it. And so on the snapshot, it's important to attempt to guesstimate what's it cost for December and divide that out by 12 and add it to the other things. There's 2 what else lines. Things can be added that are not on this list. Come back out of that. I want to mention that I've had the opportunity to teach this over the years to other therapists, and the best way to use this with your clients is to use it yourself first. Like so many things we do as therapists, we need to get to an understanding of what our own relationship to the issue is. And when it comes to finances, having worked through some of our concerns, our fears, our not knowing how to use the worksheet, if we do that with our own data first, then we can really help our clients more effectively. Okay, so let me come down here now to the debt payment. Actually, before I do that, if you're working with a client who is a couple and they keep separate finances, I would encourage you to go to my website and print off the 2-column version of this snapshot. And so it can be partner number 1 and partner number 2, and they can get all their expenses onto one page, their income on the other side. And so it helps them see clearly what the household is doing. This document works, the single column works fine for couples who have joint accounts. But if they keep their finances separate, that double column is a useful tool. Okay, so let's see the debt payments. I'm going to scroll forward to page 3 here. This is the debt worksheet. These 3 boxes are the 3 lines that are back on the snapshot. But just to introduce you to this, under the credit cards, the name of the bank, interest rates, amount owed, and minimum monthly payment. It's important to capture the interest rates, write those down, what the interest rates are paying on the credit card, because that will be helpful when they start to use strategies to pay down their credit cards. And then minimum monthly is what's being looked for in this column, so that the idea is to get a baseline of what the monthly expenses are. So to build it on the minimum monthly, of course, we all know that credit cards won't get paid off if we're just paying minimum. But by putting that in here, then we'll know how much money is left over. Hopefully there's money left over. And then that can be used as part of the strategy So that's the purpose for the minimum monthly payment there. And then this one is all the other student loans, home equity line of credit, if there's back taxes to the state of Oregon or something like that, family and friends debts, they can be captured here with the same thing with minimum monthly payments. And if it's a family member where they're saying, hey, pay it back when you can, then to go ahead and put a 0 on this line, but to make a note of it and how much is owed so that there's a record. That can be very helpful. And as I said, those 3 boxes come up to these 3 lines on the snapshot. And then the snapshot's complete at that point. Total living expenses, that's all of these lines, the debt expenses, and then this bottom line, these are the monthly, this is what the monthly expenses are for this household or for this individual. Then on this page two of the snapshot, the income, important thing, this is after taxes and deductions. So this is the paycheck that lands in the bank account. That's the number that goes in here. If there's two incomes, break them down like that. And then the different ways that money comes into household, maybe it's Social Security, maybe it's commissions or tips, and then a what else line. This might be if you're working with a 20-something who gets $300 a month from mom, it could be written right here, and then they'll have an accurate monthly average of their income. This brings us down to income minus expenses, and then this net number. And in financial therapy, we want to get to that number. We want to know what we want to know if that's a negative number. If it's a large negative number, then that's a call to action. That's a crisis. Something really needs to change. And as I saw again and again during the Great Recession, 09, 10, and 11, those could be big negative numbers where one income disappeared, but the fixed costs were still high. So the value of getting clear on that number is it gives it shape. It gives it to know exactly. Maybe it's $1,800. Maybe it's 28. Maybe it's maybe it's 500. But it's something that will continue month after month to put this household into debt. So to address it is what's necessary. A second option might be a smaller negative number, $100 or $200, or right around 0. And that's like this. That's living paycheck to paycheck. It's just balancing out. I remember some years ago working with a couple. They went through the whole process. The number, I think it was minus 260, and one turned to the other and said, I think that might be why we're fighting as much as we are. And sure enough, they came up with a strategy. They cut their expenses a bit. They got back into balance again. And then they checked in with me later on, like 6 months later, and they said that was a turning point for them. Learning that number was the trigger for action. They started to work together on it instead of bickering with each other about it. They put their shoulders together, shoulder to shoulder solution, and move forward. And then the third option is that this would be a positive number. And that's good news. What people will have gained by going through the process, even when it's a positive number, this isn't just about uncovering disasters. It is about knowing that this is the way that the money's moving through the household. And when it's a positive number, people can ask themselves, is that what we want to do? Is that spending in alignment with our values? So that's a quick introduction to the snapshot. If you have questions or comments about this process, the process of working with the snapshot, please leave it in the comment section below. And if you want to contact me directly, feel free to do that through my website. As I mentioned, I will give one more pitch. Do the worksheet yourself with your own finances as the way to have, that way you'll have confidence when you work with clients. And let me come back out to the full screen here just to say thank you for taking the time to look at this. And I hope it's helpful for both you and your clients.